Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello, Patrick Donohoe here from the Irish Farmers Journal News Desk. Now that the good weather has finally come back, livestock farmers can hope to see breeding activity picking up. Let's listen to the Irish Farmers Journal beef and dairy specialist discuss all things spring AI, stock bulls and fertility.
Hi, Jack Kennedy, dairy editor of the Irish Farmers Journal, and I'm joined by Nathan Tuffy, beef specialist with the Irish Farmers Journal, and Aidan Brennan, dairy specialist with the Irish Farmers Journal. Men, we're here to talk about breeding. Nathan, maybe I look to you first in terms of the beef side of things. Is there much AI used in the suckler herd, or is it mostly stock bull? Obviously, it's very topical at this time of the year.
Yeah, Jack, I suppose on the beef scenario, there's an awful lot more stock bull used at this stage of the year than AI. There's approximately 17% of cows annually in the suckler herd that are served to AI sires. That usually happens more so on the back end, just through management issues and things like that, when labour can be used more effectively with sheds and that. In the springtime, you've much more use of stock bull at this stage of the year, purely again through management point of view. It's a lot of work trying to bring cows in and out of fields to serve them to AI, so a lot of lads would tend to go for the stock bull at this stage.
Okay, essentially we're talking about the stock bull. What can farmers do at this time of the year, early May now, to make sure that they have a good breeding season?
I suppose for farmers that haven't started breeding yet, the bull is probably the most important part to look at this stage. You need to ensure that the bull is fertile. A lot of farmers have gone down the route in the last couple of years of actually doing bull fertility tests prior to the breeding season, just to make sure that bulls are firing on all cylinders, as I say. That's one thing that has to be done. You know, if breeding has started, then I suppose it's just a matter of monitoring the bull to make sure that he's able to serve the cows correctly. Watch for issues like feet, to make sure that he can mount correctly, that there's not too much pressure coming on the back legs, that he's well able to carry himself in that. Illness is a huge factor that can affect bulls, especially during the breeding season and prior to the breeding season. The semen a bull uses when inseminating cow is produced probably about 7 weeks before he actually inseminates the cow. So that whole period in the run-up to breeding is essential to ensure that there's no health issues with the bull that may impact on his subsequent fertility or cause him to become subfertile at any stage. Again, during the breeding season, I suppose, you have to monitor that to make sure that there's no spikes in temperature which could affect fertility and things like that as well. Probably one of the more important things you can do is accurately take notes of what cows are served. A bull can become infertile, it can become subfertile, and you can get an awful lot of repeats. And one way of monitoring that is to know what cows are served and when they should be coming back around again to watch for repeats.
Are most guys dependent on one bull, or have they more than one bull on one stock bull on these suckler farms?
Look, at the average suckler herd is around 20 cows in the country, So in terms of bulls, it's generally one in most farms. It's completely dependent on herd size. The simple rule of thumb is that if you have a tight calving period of 12 weeks and you have an awful lot of cows submitted to the bull, you could say in the first 6 weeks of the breeding season, there's an awful lot of pressure on them, so you don't want to overwork the bull. The simple rule of thumb is about 40 cows to the bull. And then if you have a young bull, it's half that again, so somewhere between 18 to 20 for a young bull.
But I suppose because, as you say, most of them only have the one, it's important to do your NCT, as you've just described, in terms of keeping an eye on him and maybe doing that calendar test to make sure that he's actually
absolutely,
both cows
Jack,
are holding in calf.
It's probably vital. In the beef scenario, the calf is your only byproduct at the end of the year. That's all you have to sell. So if you have cows that don't go in calf because of bull infertility, it can absolutely decimate a herd. It's one of the most fundamental things that you can do during the year.
Okay, so that's the bull side of things. On the cow side of things, I suppose, what are the best farmers doing now in terms of maximising conception rates and submission rates on suckler farms?
I suppose a minority of farmers would be on-off suckling calves to try and bring cows in heat quicker. In a suckler situation, you have what's called suckling inhibition, which draws out the period to the first estrus. So what you want to do is try and minimise that period as much as possible to try and get your cows calving within the calendar year again, if you can, to 365 days. That's one thing that people are doing in minority cases. In other cases, what lads are doing is they should monitor the cows before the breeding season for the first 3 or 4 weeks coming up to it to see what cows are cycling. And if cows are not cycling, or if we've started the breeding season at this stage and there's some cows that haven't been submitted, it may be just a matter of pulling those cows out and having a look to see is there a uterine infection, if there's an issue there. Maybe, a simple call for a vet if you have 3 or 4 cows can be huge saving.
What would be your top tip for a suckler farmer now, early May, spring calving herd? What's your top tip in terms of breeding?
The simplest thing is just recording your accurate data. That's the biggest thing that can be done. Without doing that, you leave yourself completely open to being hit with cows not going in calf, etc.
Nathan, we'll leave it at that for the beef side of things. Let's switch over to Aidan in terms of the dairy side of things, Aidan. Compared to the beef industry, there's a lot more AI on dairy farms. Again, what can farmers do now to maximise picking up cows in heat, etc. at this time of the year?
Yeah, sure, Jack. The biggest thing at the moment is heat detection, ensuring that what cows are bulling, you're picking them up, identifying them for AI and then submitting them. So really you've a couple of techniques and tools involved in that. There's many farmers using tail paint, so which identifies the cows that are in heat. There are other options then. I mean, some people don't use tail paint at all. They just watch the cows a couple of times a day, 4 or 5 times a day. But really, in this day and age, you should be using some sort of a tool for picking up cows in heat. So tail paint is the obvious one. There's KMRs, scratch cards, and then there's automated heat detection.
Is there a big cost with using these heat detection aids?
Well, the tail paint is relatively cheap. I mean, you can go from ordinary emulsion to paint in a bottle specifically for tail painting. The KMRs and the scratch cards are a little bit more expensive, and then you're into bigger money then for the automated products.
A lot of farmers are talking more about a vasectomized bull. I mean, is that a good option for some farmers?
Yeah, absolutely. The vasectomized bull is a good option, but not for the first 3 weeks, I'd say. So in the first 3 weeks of mating, you should have 90% of your cows bulling. If you put out a vasectomized bull there, the bull will be worn out in no time.
Any reports so far on how the breeding season is going? Is there more AI used, or how are submission rates with dairy farmers?
Yeah, I suppose it's the early days yet. Most people have started bulling with the change in weather, so anecdotally from talking to farmers, I hear reports that cows aren't as active as they were when the weather was good, so that makes heat detection even more important.
We're obviously in a no-quota era now at the moment. I mean, typically, how long do you see dairy farmers are going to stay breeding for with AI, and then what are they going to do after that?
Yeah, well, sure, what we'd be recommending is farmers to do 12 weeks at most of breeding, so 12 weeks maximum, and of that then there'll probably be 6 weeks of AI. And then you'll have release stock bulls then. So, I mean, the longer the breeding season goes on, it makes it more difficult to pick up cows in heat.
If a large proportion of the herd is not being submitted for AI, I mean, is there something a farmer can do, we'll say, to try and help that situation?
Yeah, I suppose he needs to re-examine his techniques in terms of heat detection.
In terms of getting veterinary intervention, does there much that go on in terms of treatment of these cows that are not cycling?
Absolutely, yeah. You should, if cows aren't cycling, definitely get a vet out to handle those cows. But I mean, percentage of those should be small, 3 or 4% maybe at most within a herd. There's a range of problems that they could have. The farmers who are getting the best results are managing those cows. They have them identified, and they have the vets out to give them treatment, and they're back cycling then again.
Aidan, we're in a no-quota scenario now. I mean, has the criteria for AI bulls changed as a result of coming from the quota era? What should farmers be selecting for in terms of their AI bulls now going forward?
I don't think it has changed much, really. Our targets for breeding are still the same. We want a cow with good fertility that will go back and calf every year, produce high levels of milk solids from a grass-based system. The Holstein Friesian is still the number one breed out there for dairy farmers, followed then by your Jerseys or Norwegian Reds and crossbreds. But no, I think it's fertility and milk solids from grass is the key drivers.
Thanks, Nathan and Nathan. I mean, from what I can hear, it's a very busy time of the year on suckler and dairy farms, and I suppose it would be mindful to tell farmers to give the time towards breeding and to focus on breeding, to manage their workload in terms of staying off the tractor, staying off the machinery, and putting the effort into managing both suckler cows and dairy cows. You both agree with that, yeah?
Definitely.
And the other big one, I suppose, is safety at this time of the year. There's a lot of stock bulls, as you say, Nathan, in the beef herd. Aidan, vasectomized bulls after week 3 or 4 of AI breeding. They're all still bulls and they're all act as bulls, so I suppose safety needs to be paramount on farms at this time of the year.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Despite almost 2 million cattle being traded through Ireland's 89 livestock marts each year, there continues to be questions over the future and direction of the sector. I visited the annual general meeting of the European Marts Association in Athlone last weekend to hear more from mart managers. I started with Brendan Egan, who is mart manager in Castlereagh, to get the perspective from the west of Ireland.
Brendan, prices in the mart have been particularly buoyant all year, coming off the back of a difficult year last year on the process side of things. Where do you think they're going to go, say, in the short to medium term?
Well, at the moment, they've still remained a very strong trade now, especially the store cattle, which mostly we'd sell in west of Ireland. And weaning bulls, weaning heifers have been a very strong trade all spring. And this has been helped too by some breeding heifers going to Northern Ireland now. And the strong currency exchange rate at the moment has helped this trade. But quality stock, I think, will remain a good trade in that. And listening to some of the delegates here today, the markets for our beef hopefully will remain strong for the coming year and into the next 12 months.
Sure, and just talking about the conference this morning, was there anything that stuck out to you in particular of messages to take away?
Well, looking at all the statistics and facts there seems to be a growing world population and there seems to be strong demand for food, and hopefully this will be able to aid our beef industry, and that at least prices will be maintained, if not improved upon, going into the future.
And John Horgan from Keepack raised a few eyebrows with his comments, on the relationship between processor and mart. Two things. Firstly, the relationship between the mart and processor, what's your opinion of it? And two, what shape do you think the mart sector will be in Ireland in 10 years?
Well, the producer doesn't seem to be getting a fair slice of the cake at the moment, in terms of price. Both the processor and the retailer seems to have a bigger slice of the cake, so hopefully the base price to the producer will increase going into the future if we secure these markets abroad, and that it will be passed on to the producer. And I think there's a role to play for marts in that, and farming organisations as well. So you don't foresee an enormous collapse even of the number of marts in the next little while? Not if prices are maintained and schemes like the suckler scheme, come in and things like that. I think that the store cattle numbers will be maintained at least anyway going into the future. What is it that the west of Ireland, kind of, you draw a line down the west from the Shannon, you go left of that, there does always seem to be that great stock. The land mightn't be as good as other parts of the country, but the stock is always fantastic. That's right, yeah. The quality of the land wouldn't be as good as, say, up the Midlands or that, but people are satisfied with, they come down and they buy their store cattle and they do a very good thrive, and the confirmation is always good with the stock out of it, and they give good returns, so that's what they're happy, and they keep coming back to us. With beef prices performing well in Scotland, we got the views from across the water.
Hello, John Gregor here from A&M at Thainson Centre in Varuri.
The price for store cattle in your own mart, how's it doing the last couple of weeks?
Last couple of weeks have been very buoyant, as we've seen all spring. Despite the falling prices for deadweight stock, the store prices have been very good. Yesterday, for example, we sold over 2,000 cattle. Steers are averaging 236, heifers 232 pence per kilo.
We look longingly across the Irish Sea to the prices being paid for Scottish cattle. In the medium to the long term, are the prices going to stay buoyant?
Well, at the moment the prices are back for the deadweight, but it's because of the waiting lists and the backlog. But we would hope to see that improving again as we go through the year towards the Christmas period. And is it the short stay cattle or young weanlings, bulls and heifers? Which type of animal is doing particularly well? It's the weanlings, the year-old cattle that are going out to grass to be finished at the end of the grass or towards Christmas, that are making the buoyant trade. Just in the Scottish perspective, what is the relationship between mart and processor in Scotland? Well, it's a very similar situation to you have here in Ireland, and a lot of the big processors are not buying from the live auctions, they're prime cattle. And finally, Harrison Boyd is the mart manager in Clogher Mart, County Tyrone. Here we got the perspective from Northern Ireland.
Well, I find the whole thing very interesting, and the discussion on the future of markets and how long they're going to be there. If I can relate, many years ago, one discontented farmer said to me, I'm talking about 20 years ago, there'll be grass growing out of those pens in 10 years. We're still there and we're expanding and adding a few pens every year to our market, so there's no sign of it, and hopefully the next generation will on it when I retire. So the future is strong, because that was one of the lasting conversations at the end was, in 30 years' time, even in 10 years' time, will the marts look as they are now? Well, I tell you what, a trend that is happening is that people, young farmers who don't have time to come to the market, a lot of them have a good haulier. He brings the cattle, he sells the cattle for them, does the job well for them, brings the money home that afternoon for them, and it saves them time coming to the market. So it's a very good service, and some of the good hauliers are already doing that. And John Horgan from Keepack raised a few eyebrows with his comments of the relationship between mart and processor. Your opinion on that, firstly, and secondly, is a similar situation in the north? Yes, it's a very similar situation in the north. Cattle going through a market cannot be slaughtered for a minimum of 30 days after through the market. Absolutely no reason. We're also greatly restricted by the 4 movements. It stops the movement of cattle. Even people who buy a cow and calf, and it's got 2 movements already before he takes it home and then sells it at 6 months and 9 months. The nature of the business in Northern Ireland is that the stores move from the west to the east, and that's been traditional. There are feeders within the mid area of Ulster, but it's a smaller farm in the west who rear the calves. Then they moved on 6 months, grazed for a year with some in-between man, and then go into the final finisher. And really, you can very easily knock up 4 movements before you realise what's happened. What shape of the mart system would you like to see if you were starting from scratch again, or are you pretty happy with how it looks at the minute? Do you mean with the meat factories? Yes. I look upon the meat factories as looking upon the marts. We were told during our difficulties with the 4 moves and with the 30-day retention period that really we were told by the mart operators that our only place in the market was to sell weanlings. But I don't look upon it as that. There are times when things are worth more to export, and we're there to take opportunities in that case. For example, a lot of our leaner cows now go to Southern Ireland because they're worth more there, and they have efficient boning plants there for poor cows. Stores, we haven't been badly hit with a 4 move at the moment because there's still export of stores for further feeding to England, and that has helped us along that. But people are always nervous. They don't want to. The farmer who's going to graze them, he doesn't want them any more than 2 moves, and really there's certain cattle he not bid for.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Let's stay in Northern Ireland, where all eyes are on the Balmoral Show this week. My colleague Thomas Hubert asked our market specialist Phelim O'Neill and Ulsterman himself just how important the event is.
Balmoral is the centrepiece of the agri-food industry in Northern Ireland. It serves 2 functions really. It is a serious commercial event. It does have show categories in just about everything, and it's very important for the horse scene as well, with many competitions there. But as well as being a major business occasion, if you like, it is also a substantial social event. And that has particularly taken place in the last couple of years as the show has moved out from its traditional location at the King's Hall in Belfast to the more open site at the Maze. And it is very much an occasion when, I suppose, all of, I was going to say Northern Ireland, but in fact all of the island of Ireland, and indeed many people travel over from GB as well to be present at Balmoral. It is one of the great shows in the British Isles, arguably on par with the Royal Highland Show and anything else that is on offer.
And what do you think the big discussion topics will be around the showgrounds this year?
Well, I suppose the key elements of Northern Ireland agriculture are beef and milk production. Look at dairying first. It's had a very difficult year now behind it, with depressed milk prices being the norm since middle of 2014. And that has to be a concern because unlike the rest of Europe, Northern Ireland was an area that had been in a period of expansion because the UK didn't use all of its milk quota on an annual basis, and expansion has been an ongoing feature there. It has resulted, I suppose, in big investment in milk production, new parlours, automated parlours, many farmers increasing cow numbers, and with all of that investment, I suppose there was an expectation and indeed a need for a milk price to maintain the levels that it had been at previously. And with the present milk values being way below that in many farms, the cost of production isn't being covered, and that presents a difficulty. So there is concern in the milk industry, and I suppose a hope that prices take an upward turn soon. Beef has had a pretty turbulent time as well. After a fairly strong performance since Christmas and on into the spring, prices have dropped back considerably in recent weeks. And the fact, I suppose, that beef prices are run 30 odd pence per kilo lower than they were at their peak is of concern to beef finishers, particularly farmers that are bringing cattle out of sheds that have had the highest cost of production behind them. So I suppose that's something that they wouldn't have budgeted on, wouldn't have bargained on. It's little consolation that UK price, beef price, which Northern Ireland benefits from with access to the red tractor, it is significantly ahead of the rest of Europe. But that's little consolation to people that have been feeding cattle and witnessed prices, as I say, on a steady decline in recent times. And in truth, it is difficult to see them recover up to the previous levels at any time soon.
You'll be there yourself in Balmoral with the Farmers Journal. What's planned on our side for the show?
Farmers Journal presence will be bigger than ever before, as they say, as well as our usual activities on the stand, and there to receive and welcome farmers and people with an interest in the agri-food industry from across the island of Ireland and beyond that are visiting the show. This year, for the first time, the Irish Farmers Journal are hosting a business briefing on the Friday morning, for which invitations have been circulated. And we're pleased to report that so far the acceptances for this have been much higher than expected, and at this point in time it actually looks like we will be trying to find extra space to accommodate all of those that have been invited. So that is a positive. It's an opportunity and a platform for the journal to explain to the Northern Ireland agri-food industry what we're about. And hopefully the event will run in line with our expectations.
Indeed. So looking forward to seeing you there, Phelim, on the Farmers Journal stand, and your coverage and that of our Northern team in the paper and at farmersjournal.ie.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
And again in Northern Ireland, this week on the cover of Irish Country Living is cricket star Boyd Rankin, who has played cricket at the highest level in England but still wants to be a farmer when he grows up. Mary Phelan, you travelled up to Tyrone to meet Boyd recently. Tell us more about him.
Yes, Patrick, I most certainly did. I travelled up to a place called Maher Mason. It's in rural County Tyrone, but it's actually just about 10 minutes outside of Derry City. It's a beautiful part of the country, and this is where Boyd Rankin's home grounds are. It's Breedy Cricket Club, where his dad, Robert, is actually the president, and his brother David and his sister Gemma still play there. So what really struck me about the club, I suppose, I mean, this is a cricket-mad part of the country. All they do during the summer is talk about cricket. And what really struck me about it was the facilities that they have in Breedy are absolutely phenomenal. Like, really, to find these in the heart of rural countryside, I suppose, you really wouldn't expect it. And Breedy Cricket Club actually has the biggest cricket facilities in Northern Ireland outside of Belfast. So they have a centre of excellence there. It was funded by Sport Northern Ireland and by the lottery. And inside you have this huge indoor cricket hall where you've got machines that are firing out balls at 99.9 miles an hour for the batsmen to hit. And they can convert this hall into badminton courts as well. They also have two very, very high quality cricket pitches outside and football pitches as well. So I was really, really impressed by what I found up there.
Tell me more about Boyd. He's an interesting character. He played for Ireland in cricket and has moved across the water to play in England. Tell me more about him.
Well, certainly. Well, Boyd has been very successful at cricket from a young age. He's been playing for Ireland since under 13, and he made his senior debut with the Irish side in 2003. Now, Ireland, as many people know, did very, very well in the 2007 World Cup. So Boyd secured a full-time professional contract after that with Derbyshire County Cricket Club. However, at the end of 2012, he made the move over to England to play Test cricket with England, and he actually made his debut with them in Sydney in January 2014. And Boyd will say himself that the reason he did make the move from Ireland to England was because Ireland don't play cricket at Test level, and as a professional sportsman, he wants to play his sport at the highest possible level, and at the moment it's only possible to do that in England.
So any chance of him coming back to don the green jersey?
You know, when the time is right, he doesn't see any reason for why he can't come back to Ireland and play with Ireland. But the way things stand at the moment, if you want to go from a test nation to an associate nation like Ireland, there must be a 2-year gap. Now, it's been 15 months since Boyd played with England. Therefore, that means that by next February, in theory, if he's not chosen for the England test side again, he would be able to play with Ireland. But Boyd himself is actually quite ambitious. He says there's a lot of test cricket to be played with England over the course of next year, and he is really hoping to get a place back on the team. So,
and I suppose what makes Boyd interesting from our perspective is that he also grew up on a farm. What's the family farm system up there?
It's a beef and sheep farm. So Boyd himself has a huge interest in agriculture. He actually went over to Harper Adams, which is an ag college in Shropshire in the UK. He studied agriculture with mechanisation. He came back during his second or third year and did a placement with Fleming Agri Products, which is a local machinery manufacturer. He really, really enjoyed it, and he wants to go back into farming after the cricket. He would love to be a full-time farmer. Now, at the moment on his home farm, his dad and his brother are farming it full-time, so he's not sure that there would be the opportunity there for him at the moment, but he certainly wants to stay within the agriculture side of things.
And Mary, where can we read more about your interview with Boyd?
This week's Country Living in the Irish Farmers Journal or on farmersjournal.ie.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.